What are your thoughts about copyright, or how to make sure people get paid for their labor when the labor is just what is produced is just words? My thinking is pretty much no copyright and pretty much Patreon, you know? Either we fund the work before or we pay after. It makes Banana Waffle Monkey wonder how much innovation has been held back by copyright and financial restrictions. That is one of the issues. At the same time, a lot of innovation has been fueled by copyright and financial restrictions. Like if you can get not only a copyright, but there's a patent, that's financial incentive to do innovation, but at the same time there's a lot of it's a double-bladed sword. Is that what you call it? Got two edges, cuts in both directions. Yeah, exactly. Kobayashi Maru. Since I'm a Linux nerd, open source everything. Because my thinking is that, again, that's something that probably won't happen in our lifetimes, like we spoke about yesterday. Big sweeping changes and small iterative changes. That's the way we do politics. Banana Waffle Monkey says, like, I have drafts for valid scientific experiments that I've come up with, but a lot of them will probably never be conducted on a large enough scale to produce valid results because there's no money. It's just science for the sake of science. I mean, science for the sake of science does get funded for sure. Like most of space flight is a great example for that. Like the International Space Station, there's a lot of the science going on there, and the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider, and stuff like that. A lot of the stuff are funded just because science, you know. That makes me happy, and we do get a lot out of it. So we do know from experience that science for the sake of science is useful, that we do get stuff out of it, that we just don't know beforehand things we will get out of it. From a societal standpoint, like for me, I'm just generating knowledge, good enough for me, right? So if you're not very skillful at fundraising, then your science won't be made. It's a marketing proposition. Oh, marketing. The future of the funding is crowdsourcing the funding, like kickstarting and like Patreon style paying after the fact. Like should have like quick, simple button, quick donation. Oh, you're reading this page, like off to the side there is a quick button where you can just put in a number and press donate, and it goes directly to the actual scientist who did the study, and maybe a portion to the peer reviewers as well, you know, something like that. It's got to be easy. I mean, thinking of literature, prose writing as well, something like that. Either you read digitally, some people do, and then it becomes easy, or then you just have the normal way. If you prefer holding a book in your hand, then that issue, you don't need a copyright, and you just, oh, well, and there is the issue with the copyright, because if everything is open sourced, I could screw the author over, right? I can even plagiarize, claim that it was my own, then I can read it on stream or whatever. That is why we have copyright. There must be a better way. Well, actually, there is a better way, like just pure socially. I remember like, was it a year ago or something? There was this Dead Cells review from IGN, I think. And the reviewer pretty much plagiarized the whole thing, like verbatim from a small YouTube video. And the truth came out, right? And he got publicly shamed, he got fired. But one could argue that there already is a system in place, that we don't need copyright, that we don't like plagiarism. It's generally considered a bad thing. It's like murder. It's not as bad as murder, but most people will say, well, murder is bad. Similar in that regard, that most people will say that plagiarism is bad. Credit where credit is due. And on the other hand, if people didn't think that way, like thinking about democracy again, if the majority of people thought that, well, we don't need to credit where credit is due, then copyright wouldn't be needed either, right? That's actually an interesting aspect. We go in with an assumption that people should get compensated for their labor. That's not doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Me, for example, I'm a big proponent of universal basic income. One could do a lot of labor on a universal basic income, then you won't get paid for your labor. You will just get paid. And you do the mental labor. Just one way to do it, I suppose. A lot of what I'm saying, one has to take with a grain of salt, since I am such an open source fanboy. So my views are certainly biased, very biased. So there probably are ways to, someone opposite of the side of the discussion would probably have some things to say that I just can't figure out because I'm very biased. The Ash conformity experiments, is that where they draw the short and long lines? I remember the name, but I can't put my hand on what experiment it is. Is that another one? Yep, that's one. So for those who doesn't know, it's you put 5 people in a room, then you draw 3 lines on a whiteboard or a blackboard, whatever. One of the lines is definitely, like super easily a different length than the other 2 lines. Then you ask the first person, are these the same length? First person says yes. That's right, because it's an actor, right? It shows up that the first 4 people are just actors. And they all say yes, they are the same length, when they obviously aren't. And a lot of people, like the actual subject later on, when it gets to their turn, they usually say, yeah, they're the same length. You probably have seen videos, because videos have gone viral, about something similar, when they put people in a waiting room, and then they play a sound, like a beep, and then everybody stands up. The actors, that is, stands up. And then it beeps again, and they sit down over and over and over again. Then they can replace, like, the one subject that's there. They can make that person just continue stand up, sit down. And then they can get in, like, all test subjects in the test, and they will all stand up and sit down. Well, not all. And it's the same with the Ash experiment, the conformity experiment. Not everybody does it, but most people do. Because we're social and emotional beings. You've got to fit into the tribe. That is why rejection is such a bitch. I read a new neuroscience study that pretty much showed that rejection, the pain of rejection, is pretty much the same as physical pain. It's the same neurological pathways that deals with the pain from rejection and, like, stepping on a Lego or whatever. Well, language reflects that as well, for sure. And it's a reason why I find semantics so important. Our language is very strange. We say a lot of weird stuff. So making sure that you and I mean the same thing when we use the same word is it's beneficial for everybody. Simplest explanation is often the right one. Yeah, and it's not even that. It's you should always go for the simplest explanation, right? And to be more formal, it's you should avoid doing assumptions as far as you can, which I do like because I heard this argument for it. It goes a little bit like this: that uh, if you would take all the assumptions that humans do and just do some statistics, how many of them would correspond to what actually happens in the real world, or would they be mistaken in their assumption? And I mean, I haven't done any studies, and I don't know how one would do any such studies. However, most of the assumptions people do are just bad. They don't work out. It's not how the world works, right? So therefore, a clever way to go about life is avoiding assumptions like the plague. And that is Occam's razor, right? And there is that is more about talking about science and stuff, right? Then there is the principle of charitable. Principle of charity. In philosophy and rhetoric, the principle of charity or charitable interpretation requires this. This is very similar because you're always interpreting what other people says, which an interpretation includes assumptions, right? You're doing assumptions. You have to assume that you know what that you and the other person are talking about the same thing. Therefore, since you have to make assumptions, the charitable thing to do, and like the pragmatic, there's a pragmatic argument in this as well. But for me, the best way to like view anyone else, like all the interpretation you should do, should be charitable, like the best possible assumption that you can do, like that puts the other person in the best possible light from your perspective. Like when someone says something stupid, I try to assume that they didn't mean to be stupid, because people usually don't mean to be stupid or mean. Like if they say something insensitive, if they say something mean, they probably didn't mean to be mean.